Now welcome to another lightning response video, where this time the question comes to us from EHD Man, who asked, "Hey Thor, what do you think about this regarding Filoni seemingly conflicting his plots across his shows? In Bad Batch, Omega is so important because she is able to transfer midi-chlorians in her blood to clones, acting as a sort of catalyst, obviously leading to the creation of Snoke and Palpatine clones because clones having a low midi-chlorian count seemingly impacts their ability to use the Force. While I think that plot as a whole is dumb, I appreciate how they've tried to make it work and think Bad Batch has done a great job of doing that. But in Ahsoka, Huyang says that Sabine has the lowest midi-chlorian count he's ever seen in his 1,000 years of service to the Jedi, and she still is able to use the Force with start-stop training by someone who left the Order as a Padawan. So midi-chlorians don't matter for Sabine, but they're the most important thing for Palpatine's clones. Which is it? I know midi-chlorians have more to do with potential, and maybe Palps just wanted to have a clone with more potential to do the big lightning blast, but it feels like the shows are conflicting about what they want to say about being a Jedi, despite coming from the same man. One theory I had was that maybe Sabine can only use the Force because of where they are, and maybe the other galaxy elevates people's connection to the Force because of the Mortis statues, but that's all speculation. And first of all here, that's an interesting theory, that being where they are in the Ahsoka series, in this other galaxy, and apparently on a planet that has something to do with Mortis and the ones, that it could be or would somehow amplify Force use, or be the reason why Sabine, why she went from not being able to Force pull a cup, to a few days later being able to Force push Ezra onto the Star Destroyer. Or it could be interesting if it were somehow the remnant or spirit of the sun working through Sabine that allowed her to do that. That given some of the selfish choices we saw her make along the way in the show, that the sun was therefore able to work through her somehow. Or she made a deal with him that we didn't see, and he will eventually take her over, and later on Ahsoka will become the daughter and will have some sort of conflict between those two. I don't know. I doubt that's where they're going with all of this, but who knows where exactly they're going with all this. Because, I really don't know what is going to happen with this show in general, or in Season 2, because we didn't get a whole lot of information about much of anything in that first season when you really think about it. It felt more like a combination of watch this because we'll give you answers to what happened to Thrawn and Ezra, and be excited to see Anakin and Ahsoka in live action, plus some bait for cool things to come next season. It felt more like that rather than something that truly stood on its own or was its own thing. In other words, I think those who really enjoyed it, they enjoyed it because, yeah, it answered questions left from Rebels, it brought in Hayden Christensen, that's always cool, right? And it teased something interesting to come that was connected to the Mortis gods. Not because it was truly a great story or series in and of itself. But anyway, we're not here to talk about that exactly. And so going back to the question, I do agree that there is this sort of contradicting message between these two shows, between the Ahsoka series, where they're telling us midi-chlorians or M-count really isn't all that important, and the Bad Batch that's telling us nothing is seemingly more important than midi-chlorians when it comes to Force use. And for the record here, I'm not the biggest fan of the idea that anyone can learn to use the Force if they just try or train hard enough, or should I say learn to use it well enough or proficient enough to become an actual Jedi. Because sure, with every living cell having midi-chlorians in them, and with everyone therefore being a part of the Force, I'm more or less fine with anyone being able to, with enough time, patience, and training, to learn to have some sort of connection to it, to feel it, and maybe use it to do some pretty small, frivolous little things. But becoming a Jedi, or being able to use the Force to basically kind of catch and Force push another person onto a ship above you, that should require something unique or special about you. That being, for better or worse, your midi-chlorian count. And yes, I know many years ago Lucas said anyone can learn how to use the Force and can become a Jedi, I get all that. But I believe that if it is something that anyone can learn to use, a lot more people would learn to use it, and I mean quite a few people. And pretty much all of them would learn to use it for selfish reasons. I'd argue there are a lot of people out there, speaking of here in our world, who would do virtually anything, train as much as they had to, in order to gain abilities that would give them a significant edge over other people, and essentially supernatural-like abilities. And again, they do it to gain an edge in life or for far worse reasons, like to be able to use and exploit other people with mind tricks, for example. not to help other people. Though with all that said, I'll sort of play a devil's advocate role against myself here and try to look at this from another angle. Because though, yes, at face value, these seem to be two very contradicting messages in these shows, and this will kind of go along with what you're saying in your comment here about Palpatine wanting a clone with the most potential, but you do have to keep in mind one show is giving us the perspective of the Jedi, more or less, and the other the perspective of the Sith. I mean, Palpatine likely doesn't see much of a point in transferring his essence into another body someday if he's only going to end up weaker with the Force. I mean, yeah, he wants to live forever, but he certainly wants to keep that power too if he's going to live forever. And right now, we're in the time of the Bad Batch. I'm guessing that's what the plan is, or idea is right now. I don't think the idea is to make a body for when he comes back from the dead someday, but to make a body to transfer his essence into before that ever happens. He's probably even seeking to create a clone body of himself that can be stronger with the Force than his current one, a body that can take an M count even higher than his current count is. I wouldn't be surprised if the idea right now is to make a clone of himself that can take Anakin or Vader's blood, and he'll be able to do that thanks to studying what's so special about Omega's blood that allows M count transfers, and then to make himself a new body as powerful as the Chosen One. But anyway, setting aside what exactly might be the plan here out of Palpatine, I do think it makes sense that Palpatine would be obsessed with the M count of his future body being as high as possible because he doesn't want to lose any of his power or potential, and that is what matters most to him. And in The Rise of Skywalker, the problem is or was trying to make a body that could contain his great power, and thus this is, I guess you could say, it is consistent with all of that. It does make sense, I guess. But how does it make sense with the Ahsoka series telling us it's all about training? Why does Palpatine care about his M count so much if he has already done the training and M count shouldn't really matter to him anymore? Well, it's because it does still matter, because M count is indeed a sort of limiting factor or a marker for potential power. But the Jedi, or at least Ahsoka, doesn't care about how strong Sabine can one day become, only that she reaches her own, albeit perhaps limited, potential. Which is, as I was saying before, the more Jedi perspective here, I think. Whereas Palpatine is focused on only, or is obsessed with only, unlimited power, the Jedi are not so focused on power levels. They care more about you becoming the best Jedi you can be and serving the Force. Though sure, serving the Force the best you can is going to require you to have a pretty strong connection to it. It's generally going to require a high M count to be a Jedi, especially given what is or will or might be expected of you as a Jedi, that you may even be asked to take on those who wield the dark side. They, the Jedi, under normal circumstances, only want to take the best or those with the most potential to do the most good one day. And though, as Huyang so bluntly pointed out, Sabine's aptitude with the Force falls short of any other Padawan he's ever seen before,
I have known many Padawans over the centuries, and I can safely say your aptitude for the Force would fall short of them all.
that doesn't necessarily mean she doesn't have a relatively high M count, or a high count when compared to anyone other than a Jedi, or who the Jedi would normally train. In other words, once upon a time, the Jedi would not have taken and trained Sabine because they could find other children with much, much higher M counts than hers. But that's not to say her M count is low in the grand scheme of things, or if M count were to be put on the spectrum, Sabine would be towards the higher end of the spectrum, but not at the highest, where again most Jedi would come from. It's not that her count is too low to ever be trained, it's just not going to be easy for her to learn, and she's never going to reach the same heights other Jedi would, and that they will reach in a fraction of the time she will reach her limited heights at. And so, again, I don't love the idea that anyone can become a Jedi. I think Lucas introduced midi-chlorians for a reason, and that reason was to explain why not everyone can become a Jedi. Yet at the same time, you could also argue introducing midi-chlorians opened the door to explain how some out there can learn how to use the Force to some degree, a lesser degree than a Jedi. Again, their count isn't exactly low, it's just not as high as a Jedi's count will be. And though I certainly don't love the Rise of Skywalker having Palpatine return from the dead and all that, I don't want every show from now on trying to explain that movie or the sequels in general, but I do think it makes sense, given Sith being obsessed with eternal life, that he, Palpatine, would, at this time during the Bad Batch, that he'd be studying all of this and looking for a way to make a cloned body of himself with a very, very high midi-chlorian count, maybe even higher than his current one, and that he would someday want to transfer into it so he can live forever. That totally sounds like something a Sith would do, and you could even argue he's simply carrying on the work from Plagueis before him. But anyway, I think that's going to be all I got for you this time. I'm kind of surprised at myself at how much I'm sort of defending this, but like I said, I'm trying to look at it from all sides here, and it does kind of make sense, I guess. Either way, now it is your turn to leave those comments below and tell me what you think about all this. Are these shows contradicting each other or not? Or you can feel free to ask a question for a future lightning response video. You just got to start your comment off with "Hey Thor" and then ask away. But whatever you choose to do, leave those comments below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.